Hello everyone, welcome back. This is going to be a different type of video. I've been talking about credit cards by now. Later in the history, I loved it. But today, I'm taking a different approach. I was playing Skyrim on what's today? So I was playing Skyrim yesterday on the 26th. And as I was playing it, I realized I was just running through it because, I had spent so much time as a kid playing Skyrim on the Xbox 360, as a lot of us probably might have. It was such an amazing game at the time compared to Oblivion, and even then I still love playing Oblivion. I think it's such a great time. The combat was better in my opinion compared to the kind of just button spamming that Skyrim is, but that's besides the point. As I was running through Skyrim, I was realizing that I wasn't really taking time anymore because I felt like I've seen everything in Skyrim. And when you just stop and look around, you still realize that the game is still a beautiful game for what it is. Or maybe I'm romanticizing Skyrim because of how much I love it. But as I'm running through these mines and these dungeons, I'm realizing that I'm just not stopping to smell the flowers. And I think that's something that we all need to do. We all feel like we need to get as fast as we need to get, whether it's speeding, whether it's doing a whole bunch of overtime and living at the office or wherever your job is. So I think this video is about just slowing down, because you gotta remember that we are just in our early 20s or younger if you're in Gen Z, or at the oldest, you could be getting close to your 30s. And even then, you were still young. A lot of people think once you get to your 30s, you have to be somewhere in life, but realistically, you still have another 50 years, if not more, of life left to give. So sure, there's all these things about compounding interest people tell you, like invest now so that when you're 40, you're rich. Not even, actually, you're more towards your 60s. But that also brings me back to a Drake line on Take Care. And I think it was Do Not Disturb, where he was like, no, it was on the Metro album, Not All Heroes Wear Capes, I think, where he was like, fuck being rich when I'm 40 and trying to make it now. And I think a lot of us have that thought in our head, like, why do I have to wait to be rich? Why do I need to wait to have a business, or at least a profitable business that you aren't actively at, and it just runs on itself? Because some people will tell you, you're not a business owner, you're self-employed, right? Because if you leave, your business isn't generating money, so you're self-employed. You don't own a business. And I think that can be very rude to say, because a lot of people don't go through the struggle of it all, having to go through the steps to get somewhere like that. And someone who doesn't own a business or self-employed would understand that, right? Because they went out and got their career or whatever, or maybe they went through a different path in life that ended up working for them, and they claim to be business owners, but they're like, independent contractors for a bigger company, right? So it's like, are you really business owner? Uber drivers are independent contractors for a bigger company, and we don't consider them business owners, right? We consider them Uber drivers, not even self-employed, because you're not, right? You work for Uber. Or, maybe if you run a taxi company, in your case, it would make sense. Like, yeah, I am self-employed and I run taxis and I'm not an Uber driver. But in all of it, we forget to just slow down in the process of rushing life, in a sense, and some people are doing it in a literal sense with, the steroids they take, because the gym is supposed to be about progressive overload, right? Or slowly getting somewhere. And it takes years for it. If you do anything, whether it's like go to the gym, play a sport, even like do marathons, right? You don't just immediately run a marathon. It takes months of training to do your first marathon. And even then, you'll probably end up near the end. And that's okay, right? You're welcome to take your time to get somewhere, because people are scared of failure a lot of the time. And when you're scared of failure, you tend to do nothing. And that is something I have struggled with. The fear of people thinking I'm not good enough leads to me not doing things. The fear of rejection leads me to not want to do things. And it's something I have been actively trying to get over for the past couple months. And it's been, of course, a process. A lot of you don't know this, but I used to run blogs, and I would run them for a couple months, then give up because I felt like it was going nowhere. And then once again, a couple months later, I reopen it and shut it down. And then I start a new one and shut it down. And if I would have just stuck with it all the way through, I probably would have had a sizable blog by now, because if you can read, you can write. And sure, we can all read, right? It's also hard to read. A lot of us don't know how to read. We can skim through and we can, read, but we're not really reading. We're just reading the words. When you read, you're supposed to take in those thoughts and understand what they're saying. And that is the problem with a lot of things. We jump into things not understanding what we're doing, and people don't want to essentially start from step one or even that zero. If you want to enter an industry you have no idea about, but you believe in yourself that you could just go in and win, it is incredibly delusional. And honestly, I can't even blame you, because a lot of the time I am that way. We have to be able to be the butt of the joke, essentially, because we know nothing and we're going into somewhere with people with years of experience ahead of us who do know things that we don't. And you're gonna go ahead and tell them, yeah, right, watch this. Like, no. There was a guy named Sam Zell. He was a real estate, not developer, but like a super landlord. He'd buy all these apartment buildings, communities, and he eventually ended up cashing out for around $36 billion back in 2007 before the crash to BlackRock. So in hindsight, that was one of his greatest moves of all time, right? He spent his whole life building this empire in real estate, sold out right before the crash. And of course, when the crash happened, he had $36 billion to play with after, in theory, right? Because his things were like publicly traded REITs, real estate investment trusts. So people had to get their money and whatnot, but he left with billions at the end of the day. So instead of retiring with his billions, a lot of people who reach those points obviously are incredibly competitive or whatever it is. They just cannot retire, right? When you see a lot of old people and they are still working, it's like, come on, retire. And then you talk to them and it's like, I don't know what to do. My whole life's been work. And then even to an extent, I felt that, because when I was sick for a week, I was going crazy. I needed to do something. I felt like I had to go back to the shop, had to go do something. I just needed to be working. So that's what actually led to me starting making these videos last week, because I felt like I needed to be doing something. So in saying all that, maybe it is okay to just sit there and go crazy for a while, because you need to accept whatever thoughts are in your brain, maybe, So where was I going with Zamzel? Well, he, as being the overachiever that he is, decided to buy a newspaper company because he believed he would be able to revive the newspaper, right? And I think one thing he forgot to think about is he was a real estate agent or a real estate mogul. He wasn't a newspaper guy. He knew nothing about the newspaper industry, and he went in thinking he could make it work. And as we now know, to this day, real estate works and the newspaper industry is on the decline. All these news organizations are losing to YouTube, the internet as a whole, because information is instant. You don't need to be reading a newspaper anymore. You can just Google something and you'll find it. And of course, about a year or two later, the company went bankrupt. And I think it was like $8 billion that he had invested around there, because he bought the company outright. And well, it's a lesson there, right? You need to start from step zero. If you're a great basketball player, you're not going to go to baseball and win, right? And do amazing. We saw what happened with Jordan. Not saying he didn't do good, but he wasn't in like the greatest team and just came in and destroyed the baseball industry or game as a sport, because, well, you're a basketball player, right? And I'm not saying just because you're a basketball player, don't go play baseball. I'm just saying, if you're going to be a basketball player, you should, be playing baseball on your free time. What was Jordan doing? He was playing golf. So what he should have done instead, is just go play some golf. What are you doing going over to baseball? But, that's not here or there anymore. And at the end of the day, Jordan is still, Jordan, one of the greatest athletes. And you're not going to expect Tom Brady to go play, soccer, because he's one of the best football players. So what I'm trying to say with all this is, yes, you can be ambitious and want to go conquer something, but you have to be able to start from step zero. And when you reach step zero, you're going to trip and fall and hate everything, like I have with different things that I've done. Most of it was because I wasn't willing to wait to learn. And we have to learn to be patient. As hard as it can be for us, it will be worth it. You won't be rich, in 2 years. Or maybe you will, because you figured something out. But take your time, learn everything, study the whole of everything that you want to learn. That way, when you enter, you are going in with the mindset that I am level 0. And everything I'm doing is giving me XP to level up. So maybe by the time you're level 10, you'll be able to go in and do it on your own, because you understand it more deeper. And then you start doing it at level 10 and you realize, maybe I should have waited till level 20. But regardless, by doing it at level 10, you will start leveling up infinitely faster to get to level 20, because you are figuring it out all on your own. And that's it. Take your time. And it's okay to smell the roses. We are just young. Bye.